Okay, let's continue with the unit. I'm going to be talking about exponents. So you've studied exponent in the past. We know in the past exponents is repeated multiplication. And so we have, this exponent, and we know this phrase is x to the nth power, or x raised to the n. Okay, and we know this is x times x times x, and so it's basically n times. Another thing that you might know from your past is that this is the base, and that n is the exponent. Good. Now, so you know that 2 to the third power is equal to 8. And you also know that 2 squared is 4. And you also know that 2 to the 1 is 2. So the question is, can I continue this pattern? Because everything in math is about patterns. And you might say, okay, if I subtract 1, then I divide by 2. If I subtract 1, I divide by 2. And so I'm going to continue this pattern by subtracting 1. So I get 2 to the 0 and divided by 2. And therefore, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we get our first fact. 2 to the 0 equals 1. And now you might say, can I still continue the pattern, Mr. Adler? And the answer is, yeah, you can. Well, let's subtract 1 again. So 2 to the negative 1, well, 1 divided by 2 is a half. Let's continue the pattern even more. Subtract 1, 2 to the negative 2. Well, what's a half divided by 2? That's 1/4, but I'm going to write it as 1 over 2 squared. And finally, we have 2, subtract 1 more, 2 to the negative 3. What's a half of a fourth? Well, that's an eighth, which is 1 over 2 to the third. And so we have 2 rules that we can write on the board. First, we can say that x to the 0 equals 1, as long as x doesn't equal 0. That's for calculus. 0 to the 0, you'll be dealing with that in a couple of years. The next thing we're interested in is x to the negative n is equal to 1 over x to the n. Also, this is kind of cool, 1 over x to the negative n is equal to x to the n. So, by extending it into fractions, we can see that negative exponents is how we represent fractions. Reviewing, if an exponent is negative in the numerator, it's positive in the denominator. And if the exponent is negative in the denominator, it's positive in the numerator. Let's go over some examples. Just really quick examples. We have 3 to the 0 equals 1. Open parentheses, negative 3, close parentheses to the 0. And we have negative 3 to the 0. Now, the first one, 3 to the 0, that's 1. What's going on in the second example? What do you guys think? Well, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So I'm going to put this whole thing behind a square. That thing to the 0, that equals 1. It doesn't matter what's in there, whether it's a number or a fraction or a banana or a bicycle. If it's raised to the 0, it's 1. Now, this is where kids get messed up. SAT likes this. This is a little tricky. What's going on here? So some kids say, well, if it's raised to the 0 power, it's 1. But that's not what we see here. What we see here is I see the number 3 raised to the 0 and then negated. If you recall from like middle school, that PEMDAS thing, right? if you think about it, exponents come before multiplication, and when you see a negative number, that's like multiplying by -1. So what we see here is first, we see 3 to the 0. Second, negate. And so the answer here is -1. Once again, 3 is being raised to the 0 and negated versus -3 raised to the 0. And that'll help you with the homework. Last thing, let's do some examples with our negative exponents. You're going to be asked to transform from a negative exponent to positive and vice versa. So we have 1 over, so let's see, if I give you, I apologize. So if we have, let me use green. So if we have x to the -5, we're going to rewrite that as 1 over x to the 5th. If you see 1 over b to the 7th, you can rewrite that as b to the -7th. If you see 1 over c to the -3, you could write that as c to the 3rd. And if you see d to the 6th, you could write that as 1 over d to the -6. Let's do a couple of challenge problems. How about if I say 2 to the -3rd divided by 3 to the -7th? Well, if it's negative in the numerator, it's positive in the denominator. And if it's negative in the denominator, it's positive in the numerator. And so this example will help you do some of these word problems. And that's, not word problems, examples for homework. And that's basically it. So practice this intro to exponents, and that's it.